The white lab coat on my body was no longer a symbol of profession, it was the last armor between me and the ashes of my life. At the end of the courtroom, Landon walked in with Corinne, the friend who once held my hand on the opening day of our medical center, now holding my husband's hand under the flash of reporters' cameras. He lifted his chin, speaking as if reading a verdict. Everything will belong to me, the house, the center, the reputation. All she has left is her name. I gently slid the silver USB drive to the middle of the table. My voice was calm, but each word cut through the silence like a scalpel. You're wrong, Landon. Today, I'm the one starting the operation. That morning, a steady sound so familiar I once thought it was this place's heartbeat. I sat in my third-floor office, staring at the glowing screen, watching the expense chart flash in red. Miami conference expenses, new surgical equipment, special delivery fees. Everything looked reasonable on paper, too perfect to be real. I scrolled down to the signature section. The name Bellamy Reed appeared neatly, the pen strokes sharp and precise to the point of coldness. The only problem was I had never signed any of it. The office door opened slightly. Landon stepped in, white shirt slightly wrinkled, tie loosened. He smiled, the kind of smile that calmed patients but suffocated me whenever work became the topic. Not home yet. It's almost 8 p.m. I was about to leave, I said, eyes still on the screen. But some numbers won't let me sleep. He came closer, standing behind me. The familiar scent of sandalwood cologne mixed with the faint antiseptic from the hallway. He glanced over my shoulder, then chuckled softly. Still about money? Bellamy, I told you there are things you don't need to understand too deeply. This is our center, Landon. If something's off, I have the right to know. His eyes shifted, a flicker of cold behind that gentle smile. Off? What are you talking about? About expenses with no original reports. About a conference in Miami that no doctor confirmed attending. About a medical equipment contract with a company that didn't exist before last month. He went quiet for a few seconds. Then, instead of answering, Landon leaned down, placed his hand on the keyboard, and shut my laptop. You should focus on your patients, Bell. That's your strength. The way he said my name, Belle, no longer sounded like the warm nickname from our dinners in the small kitchen. It was now a sweet warning wrapped around cold control. What about this center? The center is still ours, he said, walking toward the door, hands in his pockets. We just play different roles. You heal people, I keep the ship from sinking. The door closed behind him, leaving me alone with the sound of rain tapping against the glass. I didn't know when my trust in him had turned into quiet suspicion. Maybe since the day he started locking financial meetings for security reasons. Or since Corinne, my college friend I once helped get a job, appeared as the new financial consultant. Corinne always spoke gently, her blue eyes full of warmth. She knew how to win everyone's trust, bringing morning coffee for the receptionist, remembering each doctor's birthday, even helping me pick Landon's birthday gift last year. But since her arrival, Landon had changed. He met with her more often, came home later, and every time I mentioned her name, his smile grew strangely cautious. I tried to brush off my doubts for the sake of marriage, reputation, and all the years we'd built from nothing. But the more I ignored them, the louder the cracks became, the hurriedly deleted texts, the small lies about urgent meetings, the way Corinne's eyes darted away whenever I asked harmless questions. One Friday night, I left the operating room late. The hallway lights cast cold streaks of reflection on the floor. Passing Landon's office, I heard laughter, a familiar sound that no longer belonged to me. The door was ajar. Through the narrow gap, I saw him standing close to Corinne, too close for it to be work. Corinne's voice was low, almost a whisper. She's starting to suspect. Landon replied softly, good. When she finally loses it, everyone will believe she's unfit to run the place. I stepped back, heart pounding. The world tilted, all sounds merging into a shrill blur. I don't remember how I left the building. My shoes were caked with mud when I reached home. The next morning, I arrived at the center early and reopened the accounting files. Each number, each item, each signature pieced together a clear picture. Money funneled through a series of nonprofits and rerouted to an account under a company called Heliovantage. And at the end of that chain was my name, approving every transfer. I printed all the documents and hid them inside a patient file. Fear and determination mixed, making my hands tremble. But just as I was about to leave, my phone rang. Unknown number. A rough male voice came through the speaker. You shouldn't dig too deep. What you saw today, forget it. Who are you? Someone who used to work there. I'm telling you, in this game, the first one to get curious is always the first to disappear. The call ended. The screen went black. I stood frozen, heart racing to the edge of pain. In the mirror, my reflection stared back, a woman clinging to truth in a web of lies. I knew that if I stopped now, I'd stay safe, but forever trapped in the darkness built by others. That night, I left the center and walked beneath the mist-dampened trees. Street lights shimmered on the wet pavement, sharp as blades. When I opened my front door, the scent of Landon's cologne filled the air, sandalwood and mint, the same blend he always used. But he wasn't there. Instead, an envelope sat neatly on the dining table, no name, no seal. Inside was a single printed line. Dr. Reed, thank you for your cooperation. Everything will be easier if you stay silent. That evening, the feeling when I turned my key, heard the stiff click. I tried again, twice, 3 times. Nothing. The lock had been changed. I knocked. No answer. Light spilled through the curtains, warm, soft, cruelly familiar. The same light I used to turn on every night waiting for Landon to come home. The door opened. Corinne stood there. Landon's white shirt hung loosely on her body, its hem brushing her thighs, sleeves neatly rolled. His cologne lingered around her like a declaration. She looked at me, smiling with nothing but triumph. Oh, Bellamy. You didn't think your key would still work, did you? Landon appeared behind her, holding a glass of wine. The living room light framed his calm face as if everything was unfolding exactly as planned. This house is mine now, he said, his tone disturbingly serene. And you are a former employee. I laughed. Did you forget whose name is on the contract, Landon? He shrugged. My lawyer will explain it to you. The door closed in my face. I turned away. The empty street reflected the streetlights on the rainwater, showing my silhouette small, adrift in the dark. My phone buzzed. Notifications flashed. My bank account frozen for investigation. Another message followed. Local media reporting Dr. Bellamy Reed, accused of professional misconduct at Eugene Medical Center. In minutes, I had lost everything: my home, my name, my work, and the man I once believed was my shelter. That night, I drove aimlessly around the city through streets I once knew by heart, where Landon and I used to walk hand in hand after work. The streetlights blurred across the windshield, smearing everything into broken streaks of light like my memories themselves. Maybe everything had already started to fall apart long ago, and I was too busy saving others to notice I'd forgotten to save myself. The car door slammed shut, echoing through the night. I stepped out and stared at the black water ahead. The wind blew through my hair, sharp enough to sting my skull. When tears have been gone too long, all that's left is emptiness. My phone rang. Bellamy, it's me, May. Her voice was firm and familiar, pulling me back to reality like a rope. May used to be the in-house attorney for the center, someone I had always trusted. I saw the news. Are you okay? I'm fine. Just got thrown out of my own house, that's all. Landon's been planning this for a while. He filed a complaint to the medical board, accusing you of improper anesthesia procedures in a recent surgery. They've temporarily suspended your medical license while they investigate. If Landon fabricated this, there will be evidence. I still have copies of the internal reports. And I know what he's been doing with accounting. A faint spark lit up inside me. May, help me. Help you. I already started. I found a small motel on the outskirts of town, where the sound of passing cars wasn't loud enough to make me flinch. Each morning, I made coffee with trembling hands and tried to convince myself this was just a long, bad dream. But reality still sent its reminders: an email from the Oregon Medical Board summoning me, another news headline reading, "From life-saving doctor to suspect under investigation." My name had become a tool for others to twist and drag through the mud. And behind the entire campaign was Landon, the man who knew I wouldn't fight with words, because I believed in proof. The days that followed, I lived like a shadow. Every step measured, every phone call double-checked, Social media swarmed, with venom comments like anesthesiologist or troublemaker. Made me laugh until I went numb. May met me at a small cafe near Oak Avenue. She wore a gray coat, her frame thin, her face tired but her eyes steady. I found this in the old secure archive at the center, she said, sliding an envelope across the table. Internal audit report, last year. There are at least 3 major transactions with forged versions of your signature. I opened the file. Rows of numbers filled the pages, each ending with my name in the approval field. This is the proof, I whispered. It's the key, May nodded. But we'll need more if we're going to take him down. Does Landon have someone backing him? I asked. Yes, May replied. A major medical investment fund in California. I met one of their representatives once. Corinne was their link. They're using the center as a front to cycle aid money. So, they used my name to launder money. Exactly. And Landon's just the middleman. May's tone grew grave, deliberate. You have to be careful. If they know you're digging, they won't take your reputation. I've already lost everything, May. There's nothing left for them to take. Maybe when people hit the bottom, they stop being afraid. And that's the only moment they're truly free. I left the cafe, the envelope tucked in my coat. On the way back, through the fogged window, I saw a black car parked at the corner. The license plate was unfamiliar. When I turned onto the narrow road toward the motel, the car turned too. At the intersection, I stopped and pretended to take a call. The car stopped as well, headlights off. I walked faster, a chill running down my spine. No one knew where I was except May. But if Landon suspected, he'd find a way. The medical center was still lit when I arrived, though it was past 10 p.m. The glow from the hallways cast a ghostly reflection on the glass facade, showing me a stranger standing in that soulless light. I went straight to the 3rd floor, to what used to be my office. The door was open, but the nameplate Dr. Bellamy Reed had been removed, leaving behind 2 tiny screw holes. A small gap but heavier than any threat. My computer was still on the desk, screen locked. I typed in the usual password, no response. Second try. Third. Then a message appeared. Account disabled by administrator, Landon Graves. My hand trembled as I searched the drawers, hoping to find some printed files. Papers, drafts, handwritten notes all still there, but nothing useful. When I opened the last drawer, I saw a gray envelope tucked in the corner, no name, no markings. Inside was a single sheet of paper, with a handwritten line in blue ink, find the February 4th contract, old finance office. Someone knew I'd come back. Someone was watching me. The old finance office was on the 2nd floor, long since relocated. The lights in that corridor were dim, each footstep echoing like metal against the walls. I used the master key I'd kept since my days as medical director. Luckily, the lock hadn't been changed. Inside, dust covered the desks, the stale scent of old paper mixed with rusted pipes. I turned on the computer in the corner, my fingers shaking as the screen slowly came to life. Under financial reports, I found a password-protected folder. I tried the usual numbers, wedding date, hospital code, founding date, all wrong. Then I remembered the day Landon got the first investment from the California fund. He had opened a bottle of champagne and joked, "From now on, this day's my 2nd birthday." I typed that date. The screen unlocked. Among the files, one line caught my eye. Contract, 402. A transfer record appeared, $1.8 million from the center's account to a company named Heliovantage Solutions. The signature at the bottom was mine. Perfectly forged, so flawless I had to stare 3 times before noticing what was off. The handwriting was too clean, too precise, as if drawn by someone trained to imitate. I printed a copy and slipped it into my bag. When I turned off the monitor, my reflection stared back, pale face, hollow eyes, and an expression I barely recognized. The door clicked. I froze. "Who's there?" I stepped toward the doorway. The hallway was empty. When I turned back, a small piece of paper lay on the desk where nothing had been before. I left the building immediately, walking quickly through the empty parking lot. I opened my car door, tossed the file on the passenger seat, my hand never leaving the bag that held the contract. As soon as the engine started, my phone rang. Unknown number. "Who is this?" You found the contract, didn't you? Who are you? Someone who doesn't want to see you destroyed. But you need to listen carefully. They're watching you. Who are they? You know better than I do. Heliovantage isn't just a shell company. It's the arm of a California investment fund. And Landon is the face of it. Why should I believe you? Because if you don't, you won't have another chance to choose. The call ended. The screen went blank, no number saved. Outside, a black car rolled quietly out of the lot, its red taillights slicing through the wet pavement like blood. I sat in the car for a long time, breathing heavy. Landon's words echoed in my head. I keep the ship from sinking. Now I understood, to keep the ship afloat, he was willing to throw me overboard. I took the contract from my bag and studied the forged signature. Beneath it, a transfer code of 8 characters, one I'd never seen before. But in the internal system, every transaction had a pattern, a final approver. If I could regain access to the original files, I could trace the money's path. I opened my personal laptop and connected through the secure network May had once set up for me. In the old database, under Administrator Access, appeared the list of top-level users. Landon, Corinne, and one name I hadn't expected. Eleanor Marsh, Chief Financial Officer of the California Investment Fund. I searched her name online. The results appeared. Eleanor had once been charged with misusing medical aid funds to transfer money overseas. The verdict was read on a bright June morning. Sunlight streamed through the courtroom window, falling across Landon's face, making him squint, not from the glare, but because for the first time in his life, he had nothing left to hide. When the judge read the final words, 18 years in prison for financial fraud and money laundering, the gavel struck with a deep thud that echoed through my chest like a slow heartbeat. The room fell silent. May squeezed my hand gently, and I nodded, saying nothing. Landon turned back, his eyes locking on mine. Amid the murmurs and the shuffle of shoes, that look lasted only seconds, but I understood. Not regret, not pain, hatred, the only emotion he had left. As the officers led him away, the yellow light stretched his shadow long across the cold tile floor. I watched until the door closed. And strangely, I felt no victory, no relief, only a hollow space inside me. As if in that long operation, I had cut out a piece of my own heart without realizing it. In the months that followed, the medical center was returned to me. The press called it a symbol of justice. They took photos of me smiling in front of the sign Eugene Medical Center. But the truth was, inside me, there was no laughter left. On the day I received the keys, I stood in the main lobby, once filled with laughter, footsteps, and voices calling patients' names. Now the only sound was the wind sweeping through the long hallway, carrying the scent of antiseptic mixed with memory. I walked through each room, touching the walls, the desks, the swivel chair still bearing the scratch from when Landon once yanked it in anger. Everything was in its place, but none of it felt alive. May came to see me that afternoon, as the sun tilted toward the western wing of the building. "Will you continue?" she asked. I shook my head. "No. This center needs to be rebuilt from the ground up. I can't stay in a place stained by my own hands." May stayed silent for a while, then softly asked, "Then what will you do?" I looked out the window, where the cherry trees along the street had begun to shed their leaves. "There's something else I want to do. Not to heal bodies, but to heal those who've lost their faith. I'll start a free medical fund for women who've been financially abused, women turned into debtors by the people they loved." May looked at me for a long time, then smiled a rare smile without any trace of caution. "You know, Bellamy, I think this is the first time I've seen you truly living." My voice was quiet but steady. "Maybe it's the first time I'm not afraid." A few months later, the Haven Fund was born, a small clinic on the outskirts of town, no big sign, no media, just ordinary hands. I no longer wore a white coat, only simple shirts and the old silver bracelet my father once gave me. Patients came, none of them knew who I used to be, and I didn't need them to. They only needed to be healed. One morning, while I was sorting through files, a young woman walked in holding a boy around 6 years old. Her eyes were dark from exhaustion, her voice trembling as she said her husband had hidden all the hospital money and left her in debt. I looked at her and saw myself from years ago. I sat beside her, took her hand and said slowly, "It's going to be okay. We'll start again from the beginning. Those were the same words I once told myself in the mirror, on a night when no one believed me. And now, saying them again, I realized, some wounds only heal when you use them to heal others. I thought that after everything, the past would finally rest. But the past never sleeps, it only waits for you to forget. A small parcel waited on my desk, no sender. Inside, a velvet box. My wedding ring caught the lamplight, a thin circle of silver fire. Beneath it, a folded note: Corinne isn't dead. Be careful what you believe is over. The room cooled. Outside, the wind combed the trees. Nothing ends, it only changes direction. I closed the box and breathed once, steady. If the storm returns, I'll be the one holding the scalpel of truth. I leaned back in my chair, feeling as if I had opened a door to a pit. Everything was taking shape, which also meant I was standing in a chess game where one wrong move could erase me from the board. The car window fogged with moisture. I traced a line on the glass with my finger, watching the streetlights blur into soft golden halos. A message appeared on my phone screen: don't go back to the center. Someone knows you took the files. M. I stared at the words, gripping the phone tight. It had to be May. Outside, the wind picked up again, carrying the distant rumble of a storm. I placed my hand on the contract, feeling the cold paper against my skin. I didn't know who was helping me, who was threatening me, or who was using me as bait. But think about it, if Landon believed I would stay silent, he forgot I wasn't born to endure. I turned on the headlights. The beams cut through the wet night. In the distance, someone stood leaning against a lamppost, tall, wearing a dark coat, face hidden. I stared, heart pounding, then pressed the gas and drove away. In the rearview mirror, the blurred light flickered, and for a split second, I saw that person turn and watch me leave. I knew then the quiet war had only begun. That night, the city lay under a thin veil of fog, the streetlights flickering like faint sparks about to fade. I sat in my small rented room, the thick folder I'd printed from the old system open in front of me. The numbers seemed to move on the page, and I felt that if I stared any longer, they'd turn into ropes tightening around my throat. The phone buzzed. An unfamiliar number, no name, no area code. I let it ring a few times, then answered. A man's voice spoke low and hoarse, but each word clear and deliberate. Dr. Bellamy Reed. Who is this? Someone who knows how to save you. But if you take one wrong step, we'll both be buried. What are you talking about? Heliovantage. And the signatures you never signed. The room suddenly felt 10 degrees colder. I stood, looking out the window. The fog was so thick, even the street light across the road was a blur. Who are you? Jonas Firth. I was the auditor at the center before Corinne accidentally got me fired. The name sparked something in my memory. Jonas, the quiet man who always sat in the corner during meetings. Thin glasses, precise notes. I remembered him because once, during a board presentation, he'd looked at me for a long moment while Landon discussed a new investment plan. Why should I trust you? I asked, my voice raspier than I expected. Because no one else can show you what I'm about to. Jonas spoke again. The Lantern Bar, by the river. 10 p.m. Come alone. Don't bring your main phone. When the clock struck 10, I pushed open the door to the lantern. The bar sat by the riverbank, its dim yellow light glowing through misted glass. The air smelled of old whiskey and burnt wood, a scent both warm and lonely. A man sat at the corner table, back to the river. The dim light revealed only the edge of his face and the glint of thin silver frames. You're on time, he said calmly as I sat down. I studied him. Briefly, around 40, gray shirt, sleeves neatly rolled. He didn't look like a man on the run or someone desperate. But there was something in his eyes, a darkness mixed with the weariness of someone who's seen too much truth to speak it. Jonas pulled a thin envelope from his leather briefcase and placed it on the table. These are the transaction records between the center and Heliovantage. I copied them before I was fired. I opened the envelope. Rows of numbers lined the pages like a financial labyrinth. On the 12th line I saw my name, authorized by Dr. Bellamy Reed, code 7R. How did you get this? At the cost of a career, Jonas said slowly. And maybe my life, if they find out I still have the original. Why help me? Because no one deserves to be destroyed for loving the wrong person. I was about to ask more, but Jonas raised his hand slightly. He tilted his head and whispered, "Don't turn around. 2 men at the table behind you. One works for Corinne. They're watching us. What should I do?" "Take this," Jonas murmured. "There's a USB inside the envelope. Open it somewhere untraceable. Will you testify?" "To testify for you would be signing my own death warrant. I can only help you this far." Jonas leaned in, voice barely audible. "If you truly want to survive, remember this, Landon wasn't the last link in this chain. And Corinne wasn't his lover. He left without looking back." I listened to his footsteps fading into the rain. Behind me, a chair scraped. One of the men stood, pretending to pay, but his eyes flicked quickly toward me. I slipped the USB into my coat pocket and exited through the back door, heading straight for the river. A black car slowed nearby, stopping a few yards away. The window lowered and I saw the face inside. Corinne. The car didn't linger. It rolled away, but in that instant, I knew the most important thing. She knew I had met Jonas. I returned to my room close to midnight. The hallway lights flickered weakly, bulbs threatening to die. I locked the door twice, then set the USB on the table. My fingers trembled as I plugged it in. The screen displayed a single folder, Helio, Records. Inside were dozens of files, transactions. 1. Transfers. 2. Donor, list. Names appeared: doctors, donors, even a state senator. I held my breath, gripping the USB tightly. A shadow moved under the door's narrow strip of light. A few seconds later, footsteps faded away. The next morning, May came to my office earlier than usual. She brought 2 cups of coffee, her face calm, almost too calm. But as she set one down, I noticed her fingers trembling slightly, and her eyes avoiding mine. "What is it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. May pulled a file from her coat pocket, neatly clipped inside a transparent folder. "I think you should see this." Between the pages was a copy of an old investigation file, stamped by the California State Financial Bureau. In the center, the name Corinne Voss stood out like blood on white paper. I flipped through a few pages. One note read, "Suspected of involvement in a money laundering network through international medical aid projects. Case closed due to lack of evidence. Files sealed at the request of the district attorney's office." "Where did you get this?" "An old contact at the Finance Bureau owes me a favor. But, Bellamy, not everyone can erase a record this cleanly." "You mean, someone in the government is backing Corinne?" "I'm afraid they're the ones pulling the strings." Outside, morning fog covered the neighborhood, rooftops fading together like an illusion. I no longer knew where I stood in the world of healers, or in a chess game played by people who knew how to kill without firing a shot. May stepped closer, gently resting, a hand on my shoulder. "They don't know you have these files yet. But time isn't on your side." I turned to her. "Do you trust Jonas?" "Not completely. But he's the link we need. If he once worked for Corinne, he knows how to trace the money backward." A soft ding sounded from the phone on my desk. I walked over a new message from an anonymous number. "Someone just accessed Heliovantage's financial records at 7:12 a.m. The trace came from inside Oregon State Bank. In the world of manipulators, when someone starts digging through files, it means a betrayal is already in motion. By noon, another message arrived, this time from Jonas. "No phone calls. Corinne's breaking down. Landon suspects her. And I think she's truly afraid." A strange feeling, a sharp thrill seeing the one who once crushed me finally tremble. But right after came the dread. When a beast is cornered, it lashes out blindly, and I knew Corinne would never die quietly. That afternoon, I met May at the cafe by the river. May was already there, eyes fixed on her tablet. "Any updates?" I asked, taking a seat. "Yes. And you won't like them." She slid the tablet toward me. On the screen was a new transaction sheet: 3 transfers, each over $200,000, completed in just 4 days. Sender, Landon Graves. Recipient, C. Voss. Next to it, the description read, "Refund for consultancy services." So Landon's still paying Corinne even knowing she's under suspicion? Or he's buying her silence, May said. But the issue isn't the money. I traced the fund source, and these transfers didn't come from Landon's personal account. What do you mean? May zoomed in on the statement. The account number appeared, one I recognized instantly. That's the reserve account of the center, the one I used to receive government medical aid. The sound of my own voice came out, dry. They're using state funds to bribe each other. And the one who approved the transfers is still you, according to the system. I closed my eyes for a few seconds, then opened them. My voice low. They're setting me up as an international money launderer. That evening Jonas called. Corinne's losing control. What did she say? That Landon knows about the original contract. And she thinks I'm the one who took it. Where are you? On South Bank Bridge. But don't come. They're watching me. Bellamy. If I disappear, find a woman named Eleanor Marsh. She's the key. Everything started with her. I tried to ask more, but the call ended abruptly. The dead tone echoed in my ear, cold as if someone else had cut the line. That night, I reopened Corinne's file page by page. Among the contract copies, one small detail caught my eye. Every document signed by Corinne shared the same date, February 4th. That was also the date on the forged contract with my signature. I turned to the last page, staring at the neat, precise signature. In that moment, I knew someone was controlling both Landon and Corinne like puppets. The steady beat against the windows sounded like a heart out of rhythm. When the knocking came, I thought I imagined it. But then 3 more knocks followed, urgent, frantic. Who's there? I stepped closer, hand gripping the doorknob. A trembling voice came through, breaking under the rain. Bellamy. It's me, Corinne. Please open the door. I wasn't going to. Every instinct screamed don't. It could be a trap. But her voice, thin, cracked, desperate, sounded like someone clinging to their last breath. I unlocked the door. Corinne stood there, hair soaked, face pale, mascara streaked down her cheeks. Her white blouse clung to her body, hands clasped tightly as if holding herself together. He's going to kill me, she whispered, almost collapsing. I caught her, shut the door, pulled her inside. Corinne gasped for breath like someone who had escaped hell. Who? I asked, my voice rough. Landon. He knows everything. Knows I kept a copy of the contract. Knows I sent money off the books. He said, if I don't disappear, he'll do it for me. Why come to me? After everything you did. Because I have no one else. He wants to shut me down. But if I die, at least you need to know, he's not working alone. I handed her a towel. You know I have no reason to believe you, right? I know. You don't have to believe me. Just listen. I sat down across from her, started the recorder on my phone, screen face down. Talk. Corinne pulled a small black USB drive from her coat and placed it on the table. This is a copy of Heliovantage's transfer data. Landon said if I helped him erase it, he'd let me go. But after I did, he changed his mind. He said I was the last person who knew Eleanor Marsh's secret, and that no witness could be left alive. What secret? I asked, eyes locked on her. Eleanor created Heliovantage. Landon's just the puppet. Every dollar laundered through medical projects passed through her hands, then returned disguised as international aid. And us, the medical center, we were the legal front. A chill crawled down my spine. How long have you known? Since before you married Landon. So, you came into my life to pave the way for him? Her gaze dropped to the floor. She looked up, her voice breaking. I thought I was smart enough to control everything. But he was always one step ahead. By the time I realized it, I was another pawn. Bellamy, I'm not here for forgiveness. I want you to know, it's almost over. He won't stop. If I disappear, believe that it was him. What will you do now? Run if I still can. But I think he already knows where I am. She picked up her coat, walking to the door. I moved to stop her, but Corinne smiled faintly, almost dissolving into the dark. Thank you for listening, Bellamy. You don't have to believe me. Just don't let him rewrite this story his way. The door closed. I saved the audio file and set the USB on the table. Outside, thunder rolled, and wind hissed through the window frame. I had a feeling this night would not be ordinary. The next morning, the news broke. A silver sedan was found floating in the Willamette River early today. License plate registered to Corinne Voss, former financial consultant at Eugene Medical Center. No body recovered. I dropped my coffee cup to the floor. My phone vibrated. A new message: no name, no number, don't do anything reckless. You're the only one left who knows. And Landon knows that too. I looked at the black USB on the table, the last remaining piece of evidence, and understood that from this moment, every line between life and death, truth and deceit, had become terrifyingly thin. Because if Corinne had told the truth, the next person Landon needed to shut down was me. The morning of the trial was strangely clear, but to me, it was blinding. I stepped out of the car, heels clicking evenly on the wet pavement. It didn't feel like walking into surgery, though the logic was the same, knowing there would be blood, but keeping your hands steady. The county courthouse was packed. Cameras, reporters, whispers buzzing like a hive. I didn't look at them. May walked beside me, holding a thick file, her pace slow but firm. "You all right?" she asked quietly. Without turning, I replied, "If this is the final battlefield, I'll walk in as myself, no longer the victim." The courtroom doors opened, releasing the scent of polished wood and ink. Across the aisle, Landon was already seated, crisp shirt, silver gray tie, every inch composed. Looking at him, no one would believe he was the man who built a money-laundering empire and drove others to their deaths. His eyes met mine. He smiled slowly, the smile of a man who believed he'd already won. I sat down. The cold of the wooden table seeped into my palms. May placed her hand gently on my shoulder, a small touch, enough to remind me why we were here. The hearing began. The judge's gavel struck sharply. Today, the court continues proceedings in the case of Mr. Landon Graves versus Mrs. Bellamy Reed regarding ownership of Eugene Medical Center and related financial allegations. Landon's lawyer, a gray-haired man, stood first. "Your Honor," he began confidently, "my client is not a criminal. He acted to protect the center from his wife's emotional mismanagement and unstable financial decisions." I listened without expression. Landon's cologne lingered faintly in the air, the scent that once followed me for years now made me nauseous. "We have evidence," the lawyer continued, "that Mrs. Reed misused medical funds and committed severe administrative violations." Cameras clicked. Landon turned toward me, his eyes smug, as if inviting me to watch his performance. May rose. "Your Honor, my client has evidence to refute those claims and, more importantly, a direct confession from someone involved." She took a USB from her bag and handed it to the court technician. On the large screen, an image flickered to life: Corinne's face, blurred by my room's dim light that night, her voice trembling. "He's going to kill me. Landon is using the evidence I created to destroy me." I looked at Landon. He still wore that smile, but his fingers were tapping lightly on the table, an old habit that meant he was calculating. Suddenly, the screen flickered. The video froze, the audio cracked, then went completely dark. May frowned. "Tech, what's happening?" The technician fumbled, shaking his head. "The file's corrupted. The rest can't be read." Noise rippled through the courtroom. A few reporters raised their cameras, flashes bursting in quick succession. The judge struck the gavel, calling for order. Landon leaned back, chuckling softly, just enough for me to hear. "You're always one step late, Bellamy." I turned to May. She was composed, but I could see the muscle in her jaw tighten. Taking a slow breath, she said, "The copy is damaged, but we have another piece of evidence." I understood the signal. My hand brushed the silver USB drive in my jacket pocket, the one I'd carried like a survival charm. "Your Honor, I have a supplementary recording." I stepped to the evidence table and inserted the USB into the computer. The screen lit up, this time not a confession, but security footage from the medical center. The image opened on the accounting office. The cold glow of fluorescent light made everything look harsher. In the center stood Landon, white shirt, hands in pockets, speaking to two accountants. His voice came through, low but clear: "Transfer the funds to Heliovantage. No need for verification. I'll use Bellamy's signature." One of the men in the video hesitated. "But sir, that would be money laundering. I didn't hire you to teach me the law." Landon cut in, tone flat. "Just do it. And if anyone asks, say it was her order." On the screen, Corinne entered tense, voice lowered. Are you sure? If this comes out, she'll actually be investigated. That's the point, Landon replied, stepping closer. His words quiet but caught by the camera. If you ever mention the original contract again, I'll make sure your car ends up in the river. I lifted my head, eyes locked on Landon. He went pale for a few seconds before regaining his composure, though the slight tremor in his fingers betrayed his panic. The judge turned toward him, voice heavy. Mr. Graves, do you have anything to say? I heard the sound of a pen dropping, someone's quiet cough. Landon swallowed hard, forcing a strained smile. It's doctored. She could have paid someone to fake it. This video isn't admissible. The data carries the internal system's timestamp authentication, May replied, her tone sharp as a blade. Any modification leaves a trace code. And this recording's origin code shows it was captured on February 4th, the exact date of the falsified transfer contract. Landon gripped the chair's armrest. Murmurs filled the room as reporters scribbled furiously. The judge called a recess to review the evidence. I returned to my seat. May sat beside me and whispered, "You did the right thing." "No, May," I said quietly. "I just did what he never thought I'd dare to do." Across the room, Landon lowered his head, his knuckles whitening as he clenched his fists. The courtroom light fell across his face, revealing a twisted smile, half arrogance, half despair. The man who once held my entire life in his hands was now left with fear. A fear that reached his bones, the kind that comes when he finally realized, for the first time, I was the one holding the scalpel. Landon was led away between two officers, his white shirt wrinkled. "I ask you," the arrogance once carved into his face now dissolved, leaving only exhaustion and bitterness. Everything happened fast. Flashes erupted, reporters' voices buzzed like waves. I saw Landon's lips move as he looked back at me, but I couldn't hear the words. Maybe it was a threat. Or maybe, for once, it was the truth. May stood beside me, her face pale. As the courtroom doors closed, she turned toward me, voice trembling though not entirely from emotion. "Belle, there's something you don't know." Before I could respond, she set her hand on the table, as if steadying herself to keep from collapsing. "That USB, it wasn't from Corinne or Jonas. It was from me." The words froze me. I stared at May, half expecting it to be the nervous rambling of someone under pressure. But no, there was no hesitation in her eyes. "What did you say?" May gave a faint, bitter smile, her tone low, more to herself than to me. "I was the one who recovered that data. I sent the anonymous envelope to your office. I hacked the system to extract the security footage." The air in the room turned heavy. I could hear the ticking of the wall clock. I didn't know whether to be angry or grateful. All I knew was that something vast and conflicted was rising inside me, doubt, pain, and a terrifying kind of relief. "Why?" "Because I owed you, Bellamy. But not the way you think." She paused, voice unsteady. 10 years ago I loved Landon. Back then he had nothing, just ambition and that polished charm everyone fell for. I thought he was someone I could build a life with. I didn't realize I was one of his early experiments, testing how easily people could be controlled. She stopped, smiling faintly, a thin smile that barely covered an old wound. "I worked for the auditing firm that partnered with his investment fund. One day he came to me, asked me to delete some sensitive data. When I hesitated, he kissed me and said he needed time to complete a legitimate project. I believed him. And months later I was fired for technical misconduct. And he," she added quietly, "got his funding to open the medical center with you." Silence stretched between us. Then May slowly took a memory card from her pocket and placed it on the table. "I kept everything, the emails, the transactions, the recorded calls between him and Eleanor Marsh. When you were accused, I realized history was repeating itself. I didn't save you for justice. I saved you because I was once you, someone who believed love could heal a sick man." Outside, clouds were gathering. A cold wind slipped through the doorway, scattering papers across the hearing table. The sound of rustling sheets felt like the breath of the past, wrapping around my throat. "Did you know it would end like this?" She nodded faintly. "I knew one day he'd pay. I didn't think it would be by my hand." In my mind, I saw Landon with his head bowed, wrists cuffed, Corinne vanishing into the rain. And now May, the woman who had stood quietly behind me all along, revealed as the silent witness to it all. May, you can walk away. Forget everything. No one has to know you were involved. She gave a sad, defiant smile. You think I have anywhere left to go? I lost my career, my reputation, and my youth because of him. I'm not afraid anymore. There's one more thing, she said, her voice deepening. When I restored the data, I found another encrypted file. I couldn't decode it, but I'm certain it doesn't belong to Landon. Doesn't belong to Landon? May met my eyes, her look deliberate. It belongs to Eleanor. And I'm afraid this isn't over, Bellamy. You've only touched the tip of the iceberg. I had once thought everything would end when Landon was cuffed. But now, hearing May's words, I understood. Justice doesn't come from the court. It comes from those who dare to drag light into the darkest places. Thank you for not letting me drown in his story. She smiled faintly, her eyes wet but glowing with something rare, not joy but release. No, Belle. You don't understand. You're the one who saved me by surviving. A car horn blared outside, snapping us back to reality. May stood, put on her coat, and walked slowly toward the door. As her hand touched the knob, I called out, May, what will you do now? She turned, her smile tilted, sad but proud. I'm going to find Eleanor Marsh. I want to know why women like us always end up paying for someone else's sins. The door closed softly. I stared at the empty space before me, feeling everything settle into silence. Only the steady ticking of the clock remained, reminding me that even when the illusion shatters, the story isn't over yet. I stepped out of the courthouse into a windless May morning, pale sunlight slanting across the gray stone steps. Most people had already left, only a few reporters lingered, hoping for their last photos. I said nothing, just nodded at May and walked toward the car parked by the curb. 18 years, that was the sentence the judge had given Landon. 18 years sounded long, but in my head, one thought kept repeating. He had already stolen 10 from me before that. When the car door shut, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror, a face no longer belonging to the woman who'd been forced out of her home on a rainy night years ago. But I wasn't the same person either. A part of me had been drained by this war. What remained was learning how to exist again. May sat in the driver's seat, took off her glasses, and turned to me. Will you go back to the center? I shook my head, my voice hoarse after days of tension. I don't think I can trust it anymore. The center can be rebuilt, but what it hid cannot. She nodded quietly. The car rolled slowly down the empty street. On both sides, the trees had sprouted pale green leaves, the scent of sap blending with the breeze. I leaned my head against the window, watching people move on with their lives while I, somehow, was still learning how to breathe again. A few weeks later, I officially resigned from the board. In the final meeting, I handed over management to a group of young doctors. No one said much, but their eyes carried a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. I smiled softly, signed the last paper, and stood. Let this place return to what it was meant to be, I said. A place for healing, not for hiding wounds. That afternoon, when I left the building, I didn't feel the weight anymore. I opened a small medical fund afterward, in the suburbs, a place where women suffering from financial abuse could receive care without papers, without proof. All they needed was the will to live again. I named it the Haven Fund, after a former patient who once told me, "Dawn isn't a new beginning, it's enough light to see you haven't disappeared." On opening day, about 10 people came, mostly middle-aged women and a few young girls. One woman, from another state, kept her hands buried in the pockets of her torn coat. As she stepped inside, she whispered to me, "I heard the doctor here doesn't ask about the past." I smiled. No one needs to explain why they want to live. She nodded, then broke down crying. I handed her a tissue, feeling as if I were looking at myself in a mirror from years ago. The months that followed were calmer than I had expected. May often stopped by, bringing coffee and newspapers with important headlines already marked. One morning, she set a paper on my desk, her voice low. "They say Landon's filing for an appeal." I only shrugged. He can't stand being forgotten. He's spent his whole life surviving through other people's eyes. May gave a faint smile and said nothing more. I knew she was tired too. We were both living on in a world that had already broken. The only difference was how each of us chose to stitch it back together. That evening, I stayed alone in the small office of the fund. The warm yellow light spilled over the desk, soft enough to dissolve into the air. I was reviewing a list of new patients when the receptionist knocked and handed me a small parcel. "For you, no sender listed." I took it. It was wrapped in plain brown paper, no postage stamps, only a slanted handwriting familiar enough to send a chill down my spine. "To Bellamy." I sat down and opened it slowly. Inside was an old velvet box. When the lid lifted, I saw a faint glimmer: my wedding ring. The same one I had thrown into a drawer in despair years ago. Beneath the ring was a folded note, the handwriting rough but unmistakable: "Corinne isn't dead. Be careful what you believe is over." I sat frozen, holding the paper, hearing the loud thump of my own heartbeat. The room suddenly felt cold. Outside, wind hissed through the trees, carrying the faint clatter of metal from the porch as if someone had passed by quietly. I set the ring on the desk, staring at it for a long time. The reflection from the silver band formed a small circle of light on the paper like a spark spreading slowly. "Corinne isn't dead." The words echoed in my mind, over and over, like a voice in a cave. If she was alive, why send this to me? A threat? A warning? Or an invitation into another spiral? I walked to the window. The city outside was still glowing, streets intertwining like the veins of a sleepless giant. I wondered how many people were living unaware that their lives were still being controlled by the past, just like me, newly free yet already feeling an invisible hand around my throat. In that moment, I understood. Nothing ever truly ends. Justice is only a pause, while truth, it lingers somewhere, like a crack beneath healed skin, waiting for the day it splits open again. I turned back to the desk, looking at the ring. The lamplight reflected off the metal, forming a narrow halo around the handwritten words. I reached out, touching the surface. The cold ran through my fingertips. Everything should have been over. But I knew the moment I touched that ring, it all began again. Some wounds only seem healed. One memory is enough to make them bleed. And I still wonder, maybe what we call the end is the beginning of another journey. Life doesn't always need revenge to balance the scales sometimes. It only needs the courage to go on. If you've ever had to let go of someone to hold on to yourself, I hope this story helps you see the strength still living in your heart. Please like, follow, and subscribe to hear more stories like this. And tell me, where are you watching from?